everyone, welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. I know that it's been a minute since my last video, more on that in a second, but today's topic is going to be Wes Montgomery's Full House. This was just put out by Craft Recordings on their Original Jazz Classics banner, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to discuss it, especially because about 2 years ago, I did a whole video on the complete Full House recordings, which was put out by Craft in a 3-disc series. So now we have this OJC single disc. Guess what? They're different masterings. So what's the deal? That's what we're going to get into today. As always, if you haven't yet, do subscribe. Of course, you can like this video, and you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at what_can_brown. All right, so just a little bit of preamble before we get into it, because I kind of want to address, what's been going on really over the last, call it 3 or 4 weeks since I've made my last video, because this has indeed been, I think, the longest gap that I've had in terms of not producing any content for YouTube. So what's the deal, to the extent that anybody cares about this? It really has been just a scheduling thing. So over the last couple of weeks, I traveled to New York. I did a 5-hour set on WKCR highlighting the Mainstream Records label, which was a lot of fun. I got to see, Ravi Coltrane at the Village Vanguard while I was there. Hung out with a couple of other people that you may know from the sort of YouTube vinyl collector community sphere. Otherwise, live music? I saw Micaiah McCraven here locally in Atlanta. I traveled to Mexico last weekend. I have LA coming up this week. Actually, later this week is the mastering session for the second release that Gamut Recordings, my own label that I have with my partner Philippe Berman, is putting out. So the mastering session is this week, which is another reason why I've been busy. And so, yeah, just a lot going on. But I needed to come back and talk about something, because I have an insane amount of vinyl that has come in over the last several weeks, and I'm just really behind. Plus, I had to acknowledge I seem to have crossed the 10,000 subscriber threshold, which is really exciting. And so I didn't want to, it's not just singing my own praises, but it's more sort of recognizing the fact that the channel has continued to grow, and yet I don't put any more content out apparently. So anyway, that is going to change. I am trying to get back more in the habit of making content. And certainly we're going to kind of kick things off again with this video on Wes Montgomery's Full House. All right, so the last time that this music was put out was about 2 years ago. It was a triple disc 180-gram edition called The Complete Full House Recordings. So again, I made a video of this release, in fact, probably like a 20 or 30-minute video. It was released under the Craft Recordings banner. The lacquers were cut, as described by the hype sticker for this one. The lacquers were cut by Kevin Gray. The all-analog mastering was by Joe Tarantino. So what they did for this release, and you can see it's like a gatefold thing. Again, there's 3 discs. What they did is they combined the original album plus alternate takes, as well as a song or two that I think never made the original album. So this edition retailed for something like $76. You can still get it, although at last check on Amazon, there's somewhat limited stock. But for a discount, I think it's like $63 on Amazon. I'll include a link in the description in case you want to check that out. But see, I think that whenever a more expensive premium edition with bells and whistles like this comes out, and it's not accompanied by a standard edition, people kind of wish that maybe there was a way to get that cheaper edition. Like if you're somebody who just wanted the music on the original album, they did not put that out at the same time as this. It was just the 3-disc version. So I think that now is the time, right? A couple of years later, with this Original Jazz Classics edition, and apologize, the shrink wrap's still on it. This one retails for $39, so much more, at an affordable price point. And guess what? It's not the same mastering, as I said up front, that was used, not the same mastering engineer that was used on the triple disc version, although both are stereo. So this is an opportunity, I suppose, to hear if there's a difference in sound between these as well. All right, so let's start talking just about the OJC. So by the way, this hit the street on February 27th, so just a couple of weeks back. Their website does still say that it's pre-order. It's kind of weird, but I'm pretty sure that's an error, because they are fulfilling orders right now. So know that. And what I'm going to do though is I do want to reiterate a little bit of the information that I shared in my last video several years ago when I talked about the triple disc, because chances are most of you missed that. Either you weren't following my channel or you just, who remembers 2 years ago. So just to give you a little bit of that, this album was recorded live in Berkeley, California in 1962 by Wally Hyder. So he was actually a famous recording engineer who was responsible for recording a ton of stuff. So he recorded the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl in 1964. He recorded the Monterey Pop Festival, the Monterey Jazz Festival. He also owned, I believe, a famous studio that recorded a number of crazy albums by crazy, like great albums by like Santana, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and many others. Um, and so, there's some good people, I think, that came together for this recording at the Subo. So the Subo was a cafe, I suppose, in Berkeley. I think the best way probably to describe it is a cafe, just from like what I can tell on the box here. The band featured on this album is pretty interesting as well, because these are guys that you wouldn't necessarily expect to come together for a Riverside Records release. And the reason was because Miles Davis was in town at the time that Wes Montgomery was, I guess, preparing to record this. And he, presumably Riverside or in Keep News, reached out to Miles Davis, and they were able to get Miles's band at the time. So if you think about 1962, who that would have been for this is Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, and Jimmy Cobb. And let's see, Johnny Griffin happened to be in town as well, and so he joined the session. So just from I guess from a timestamp standpoint, this would be after Miles recorded "Someday My Prince Will Come," but before "Quiet Nights," before "Seven Steps to Heaven." So yeah, it's in that time period. Apparently, this band was put together pretty last minute, but it was promoted on the radio. It ended up being very popular, and not only did they play to a sellout show, and I wouldn't exactly say that it's a crowd, because here I'll probably put it here and maybe do a cutaway as well. You can see the cafe situation here. But not only was it a sellout show, but there was also a line around the building of people wanting to get in. So in any event, a fairly intimate event here, and I think that the sound demonstrates that it was carefully recorded as well, because it does sound quite good. So as I mentioned up front, this is indeed a brand new remastering for this 2026 release. It does not leverage the same one done by Joe Tarantino several years ago. Instead, this one is from Kevin Gray from Coherent Audio. And it's listed as an all analog sourced from the original master tapes. And again, it would be stereo here. I did do some A/B testing, by the way, of this with the triple disc. And so I do want to I do want to address that just a little bit. It's so hard to do, but I do want to address it a little bit. But otherwise, I mean, what to say about this, I suppose. Know that one of the other differences is that this was pressed at RTI, whereas the triple disc was at Optimal. And obviously we don't have a gatefold here. This is just kind of the standard thing that OJC is doing, but they're doing a damn good job of it. I mean, these are always really high quality jackets. They look great. There is this kind of, it's a nice finish. It's not super high gloss. Obviously they come with these pesky obies, which are a little bit of a pain for me anyway. But yeah, I mean, in any event, with whether you're going after either of these, you're going to at least get the original album, although this is the only one that comes with the exact original style cover. So as far as the music goes with this album, I have to just say kind of up front, I've been a huge fan of Full House for a long time, a huge fan of the Riverside Records catalog, of Wes Montgomery's work for Riverside. And so I don't want to say necessarily that I'm biased in terms of addressing this. Maybe I'm a good person to address how does it sound, and what is the album like. I'm just a really big fan of this. So one thing that I would say is that I think with Wes Montgomery's work for say his studio work for Riverside, you tend to get more sort of polished versions of songs that are a little bit more bite-sized, they're a little bit more snappy. Here, because it's live format, he gets a chance to stretch out. And I think he takes full advantage. There's 1, 2, 3 tracks on here that are over 9 minutes long. There's one at 7-minute mark. And so, there are some longer format pieces here, which I think just makes sense because if Wes Montgomery was leveraging Miles Davis's band just because they happened to be in town, my guess is that they didn't have a lot of rehearsal time. Obviously, these are all professionals and they probably didn't need rehearsal time, but they would have needed to pick content that, I suppose is at least either stuff that they were familiar with or arrangements or compositions that are relatively easy to learn, say blues based, maybe a sort of quick and snappy melody before they get into the solos, and then spend a lot more time on the solos because that's something that these musicians can do whether or not they know the tracks or the charts at all. I mean, I say at all, obviously it depends, like the arrangements are still important. So what I would say though about this is that the opener Full House is probably one of the highlights, probably why it was named, the name of the album, but it's really good. And that was probably, that actually could have been spontaneous. I need to look this up because that just occurred to me. I wonder if Full House was spontaneously named and recorded while at this set. Like maybe they came up with like a short little thing and then just expanded on it. And they called it Full House because it was sold out. I don't know. It's probably in the liner notes and I just missed it. But anyway, Full House is a 9 minute plus song. Really great solos. Wes sounds amazing. Like they hit it right off the top. Like there isn't an introduction or anything like that. They just dive right into the music, at least in terms of what we hear. After Full House is, I think, a curiously placed tune because it's a 3 minute super sparse thing that is mostly just Wes Montgomery. It isn't just him because there are some kind of like light bass and brushes on the drums and stuff. But it's just a very sort of, I don't know, romantic kind of like ballad called "I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face." So that one's really good, and that one's a standard. Whereas Full House is credited to Wes. Otherwise, there's two other Wes Montgomery tunes here. There's "Blue and Boogie," which is a Dizzy Gillespie tune. I'm just seeing a typo on the complete Full House Recordings one in terms of the track number for Blue and Boogie. But anyway, so that's a Dizzy Gillespie one that would have probably been one these musicians were familiar with. And then the second side we have two more of the Wes Montgomery, and then a standard that is "Come Rain or Come Shine." So I think it's a varied list of music, but I think this is just a really complementary venue and group for Wes's sound. It works really, really well. The fact that he's the only one that's electric, right? Because later on he would record with organ players, and that offers a completely different sound where typically the organ would be playing the bass part as well. Just a very, very different sound, whereas this is more in that, not quite hard bop because it is just a little bit after that, but the hard bop moving into more of the blues and soul stuff. And this is just a great group to execute it with Wes Montgomery. All right, so I think I have to be a little bit careful to make sure that my ears aren't playing tricks on me when I talk about how these two records sound relative to one another. So as I'm sure many of you can appreciate, right? It's difficult to do an A/B comparison because you're getting up and you're taking the record off and you're putting another one on, and what if it was cut a little bit softer or louder, and how do you adjust and really make sure that what you're hearing is like the true A to B kind of comparison to the extent that you can. Um, so at the same time that I want to be careful, I also want to give you like my real impression of the differences. So to me, this latest one by Kevin Gray, the mastering sounds a little bit rawer than the Joe Tarantino one. So I would say that to the extent that there are differences, it's minimal. But to me, maybe the best way to describe it is that Kevin Gray's latest edition here for OJC sounds more live. Now, why would that be, right? So I'm not the expert here, but it could be that Tarantino's mastering added more EQ in terms of addressing some of the musician's harshness. It could have addressed balance, I suppose. It does sound to me that there is a little bit more evenness across the musicians in the Tarantino mastering as well. Whereas Kevin Gray's, I feel like it sounds, like I said, just a little bit more live. I thought, to put a finer point on it, I thought it sounded like Johnny Griffin's playing was softer in some areas, especially at the beginning of track 3, that Gillespie tune, Blue and Boogie. That, the Kevin Gray cut probably captures the fact that maybe he was a little bit further from the mic, like maybe just positioned just a little bit further away for just like a little bit, or like the kind of the opening, and certainly not relative to his solo later. Or maybe he was just not playing at the same level, like the same volume. And I just thought that that's how it sounded in the Kevin Gray cut, whereas it felt like he's just sounded a little bit more present or a little bit more even in the Tarantino release relative to the other musicians. On the ballad, I've grown accustomed to Her Face, which is that soft one that I just referenced. It sounded to me like there's perhaps more character in Wes's guitar. Like I said earlier, just a little bit rawer in sound, where you can hear maybe a little bit more of the attacks, versus the Tarantino cut. And just overall, I felt like the Tarantino cut just sounded a little bit smoother. Now, are these things that are noticeable if you don't have both of these? No, I mean, I can't imagine that they would be. Do I prefer one over the other? I might prefer the sound of this latest Kevin Gray cut. I think I like hearing the liveness of it beyond just the audience noise, obviously. But both sound great. And what I need to be careful about is saying that I prefer something just because it's newer, right? Versus, what would I really feel like between these two? Let's say that I kept them both for like a long time and listened to them both extensively. Like, what would I say? I don't know. I don't know what I would say. But this is just my attempt at kind of giving you, if there are some of these subtle differences, that's what I would say. And bottom line is that there are two different masterings. So those are just kind of my initial thoughts that may or may not be biased by the newness of this latest OJC. So I guess, in conclusion, is there anything to complain about? And I really don't think that there is. They did a great job. I think people are going to like that now this is available in just a single disc edition, which makes it more affordable. Didn't have any quality issues in terms of marks or warping or anything. Arrived with all the corners sharp and everything like that. So no complaints about this. And overall, I think more than just saying that, I just think it's great that they're putting this out, because I am, like I said up front, a big Wes Montgomery fan, a big Riverside Records fan. And even though I've been able to listen to my triple disc, I know some people waited, and now they have the opportunity, right, to get this at that more affordable price point. You get every bit of the great music, and it sounds great. Great to hear Wes Montgomery in this kind of live format, alongside such accomplished and professional musicians. So yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts about this. I'm a fan, and I do have an original, but obviously this is going to sound better, because I feel like these always do. Obviously, it depends on what you're into. If you really want that kind of vintage sound with records that maybe have a little bit of character, have a little bit of noise floor. These OJC ones, they do such a good job. Everybody involved seems to be, sort of top of their craft, right? Pun intended. And they just make sure that you're going to get a great, clean sounding copy really every time. I picked this up. I've also got the Vince Guaraldi Bolus set that's in. Maybe I'll do a separate video on that. But I just think this OJC series has, I'll call it, proven me wrong, because when they first announced this, if you go back to my early videos, when they just announced the OJC series, I was complaining about how, like, why are they dusting off the OJC name, because it's a somewhat cheesy logo, very like sort of 80s in style. Like, why are they dusting that off? Was OJC really the hallmark of quality at the time? It felt like nowadays you could, at least at the time, you could get them for like $6 or $7 when you found them. So I was a little bit of a skeptic, but they've proven me wrong really at every turn, because each of their releases sound great for all the reasons that I mentioned. So I think that's it. This is a good way for me to sort of ease back into the rhythm of making these videos, because again, it's been a month, but I do appreciate all of your attention, all 10,000 plus of you, even if you don't watch all my videos. So yeah, look forward to more content, hopefully very soon. So thanks everyone for sticking with me, and I'll see you next time.